Welcome to the first of 5 video modules that will hopefully help educators and teachers navigate the Dynamic Learning Maps alternate assessment system. We're starting out with the first video that is called How Do I Know That I Am Ready to Begin Assessments in the Fall Window? This set of videos and associated materials is going to be living in the Agora site through AAPD Online this year. The idea is not to duplicate the required training from DLM, but rather respond to some of the frequently asked questions the teachers have had the last several years as they've navigated through the system, and just to try to provide some additional resources to help teachers. Some of these modules will just be accessed by teachers individually for their own learning through the Agora site. There will also be some AA systems and UENs that may use these materials in a facilitated manner or with their PLCs. So these materials will be archived on the AAPD Online Agora site, which is functioning as sort of a community meeting place. So it's a place where teachers can access the materials, and there'll be other state-issued materials regarding DLM and alternate assessment that you'll find there as well. So we just wanted to mention that this is a location of where these materials will be archived during the year. You may have found them yourself, or you may be going through this material as a facilitated group. To start out, though, I also wanted to take a moment to quickly give a tour of the Dynamic Learning Maps homepage and some of the materials that are on there. In this set of materials that we're hosting on the Agora site, there will be, under each video, there will be associated materials and direct links to some of the key materials and manuals that are going to be helpful for you throughout the year. And all of those, virtually all those, are living on the DLM page, and so we wanted to give you a quick tour of what that looks like. So here we are on the DLM homepage. I've navigated to www.dynamiclearningmaps.org. So this is the main page that you'll want to bookmark for reference. And I will be, throughout this series of 5 videos and the materials on the Agora site, we're going to be highlighting different resources that you'll find on this site, and as I said earlier, we'll be trying to link some of those really key ones directly. But I wanted to point out a couple really important aspects here. We'll be revisiting the site later. You can see here I'm going on under Assessments and Operational Testing. Let's go there and take a look. And when you see here, you can see there's a drop down where you're going to select State. Just a reminder that the DLM is a consortium working with many states throughout the country, and so there are some materials that are specific to our state. So I'm going to drop down and I'm going to select Iowa. When I do that, you can see I'll get a list of key resources. And right now you can see it's prompting me, what is your role? And it just clicks any, so it gives me a whole variety of links. If you wish, and again, our target audience for these videos are teachers, those giving the alternate assessment. We can narrow this down. So for example, I can select test administrator. That would be the teachers giving the tests. If I apply that, you can see that my list is narrowed a little bit. It's giving me the most likely types of resources that you as a teacher may be looking for. And you can see there's this will be dynamic throughout the year. New versions of manuals and different materials will be added here, but you can see what it looks like at the time of recording. I especially want you to notice here the Test Administration Manual, PDF. There is a very good manual put out by DLM, and this is the manual for test administrators, the teachers giving the assessment. And we will link the most current version of this on the Agora site, but I wanted you to know that it is here as well. So again, this is just a location for these materials, and throughout other parts of this training series, we'll come back and look at some of these materials specifically, but this is just for the purpose of a quick tour of some of the things on the DLM site. As we get into the role of talking about making sure that you're prepared for the fall, for the testing window to open, I wanted to review several of the roles that people play in each district. And there is someone assigned to each role here. Even for small districts that may only have 1 or 2 students taking the alternate assessment. So if we start out here, someone has been designated as the district assessment coordinator for alternate assessment. Most often this is a special education coordinator, But you can see there is a list of the key duties. That would be someone to kind of oversee the testing process, support you as a teacher, to make sure that you're hitting deadlines and that you have the support you need to complete the accountability assessments for your students. The data steward is listed here. That's a very important role as well. Sometimes coordinator and data steward can be the same person, particularly for small districts. But data steward is very important because in the educator portal that we'll be talking about shortly, with the place where teacher and student data is living to kind of inform the assessment process, the data steward is the person who creates accounts for teacher users, who gets students into the system, and assigns students to rosters for teachers so that they can proceed with testing. So they have a very important role, and you're going to want to find out who has that assigned to them in your district. Then third, technical liaison. Again, sometimes these can be overlapping roles. One person may have more than one role, but in each district there has been a request that someone serve as a technical liaison. This may be your tech coordinator, but this would be a person that might be able to help you with technology-related issues. There's not a tremendous amount of software that you'll need to do DLM testing, but for example, Adobe Reader isn't necessary. Most people have that. There is a download of a software called Kite that helps you deliver the assessments to your students, and just helping you address the kinds of issues that may come up with an internet delivered test, such as network outages, any kinds of tech types of things that you might have problems with. So that's the third role. I want to emphasize that the data steward has a very important set of duties, especially in the fall. They will enroll you in DLM portal, assigning you to a teacher role. Some of you may be veterans and already be in the system. If you're new to alternate assessment, when your data steward enters you into the system, you'll receive a Kite activation email. You'll hear the word Kite later that is associated with the DLM system, and that will allow you to set up a portal account. The data steward will also add your students and create rosters for you for all of the content areas, whether it be ELA, math, or science. And very, very critical that your data steward get these things done early in the fall, because you will not be able to do your necessary testing activities until you're in the system and your students on rosters. At the bottom of the screen here, you can see there is a short video by DLM. If you are using this materials in a facilitated format, you may want to stop now and go to this video and take a look. This just illustrates how you, as a teacher, can go in and validate your student rosters and make sure that the right students are in there that you're going to be working with, and that they're assigned to the appropriate content areas, ELA, math, and science. For those of you that are watching this independently, this video is linked along with the other Agora materials, and you can reference that later as needed. On this next slide, I'm just giving you a quick reminder that for DLM testing, really we're talking about two systems. This bottom one, I can start down here, Educator Portal. Educator Portal staff and educators have accounts. This is the place where your data lives as a teacher administering your students, or demographic information, their information about their skill levels through the first contact survey that we'll be talking about shortly. So all of the information about students and educators is in the portal. This is also the place where you would manage your data. You'd be able to receive reports and those kinds of things. So staff are logging in Educator Portal through their accounts. Now the Kite client is for students. Students will actually log into the Kite client, and the purpose of this, the Kite client is a piece of software that will deliver the tests to your students. These two systems are communicating. Information is coming from the portal, it's informing the Kite client, but when the time comes for testing, you will actually log in with your student login information and passwords and deliver tests that are specific to them. So this is just kind of a reminder that there's two parts to the systems, and kind of help you with the vocabulary when I use it, talking about Kite client versus the portal. How do you get to the portal? My favorite way is going to the DLM site. We talked about this earlier, www.dynamiclearningmaps.org. If you're accessing the portal through that site, look, I've marked here at the bottom the educator portal login. There's a handy link there where you can log in with your personalized information. So if you get familiar and with going to the DLM site, just know that that portal login is always available at the bottom. Or if you prefer, there's a direct link to the portal, and that's listed down here. You could save that into your favorites, but these would be two ways that you could get to the educator portal. Now thus far we've given you quite a bit of kind of background information to get you started, but now we really want to talk about the core of what this particular video module was about. What do I need to do to prepare myself for assessment in the fall? And we're going to go into a little bit of detail on 4 key items that you'll need to complete to be ready for testing. Now we'll go through these in some detail, but also be aware that in the test administration manual, which is linked to your Agora site, and that's the manual that is specifically for teachers who are giving the tests, there's lots of detailed information on how to complete these activities. What we'll try to do is give you a brief version and a reminder of these key activities you'll need to do. So let's talk about all 4, then we'll break that down a little bit. Step 1 is sign the security agreement in your account. We'll show you that shortly here, but you need to sign off on that, indicating that you agree to keep materials confidential. The second thing is to complete the required DLM trainings. There is a separate site where that happens, which communicates with the portal. We'll talk about that shortly, but there is a required training and that can be done independently. Those of you watching this video right now are learning more on your own, or you may be in a facilitated session that is optional to kind of help coach you through this process. But there is a required DLM training that is a different number of video modules with questions depending on whether you are returning or a new teacher. So the second thing is to complete that training. Once you do that on a different site, it'll communicate back to the portal, telling the portal that you're ready for the testing season. The third item is completing or updating personal needs and preferences for your students. That would tell the system what types of accommodations your students may need, whether it be read aloud or magnification on the screen, those kinds of things. And you'll learn a lot about that as well in the required training. And fourth, very critical one, complete or update the first contact surveys for your students in the system. The first contact survey is a survey that tells the system quite a bit of information about your students, their skill levels in reading and math and communication. It's very critical because the first testlets that are given to your students are based on this survey. So the system needs to know, for example, whether a student is at a pre-symbolic level of communication, whether they're a student that's using words, whether they're a student that is even has some beginning conventional reading or writing skills. So there's a series of questions that informs the system of those things, and that is called the first contact survey. So these are the 4 things that need to be done to be ready for the testing season. Okay, first step, signing that security agreement. A very, very quick, easy thing to do. When you get your portal account and you go into My Profile, you can see there's a choice for security agreement. You're simply going to type your name and sign off saying that you agree to that. And you can see on screen here the kinds of things that that is looking at. It talks about the fact that tests are secure, teachers are not supposed to store or save them on computers, information is to be kept in a secure manner, those kinds of things. So it's just simply a matter of checking off agreement with that security agreement and clicking save and moving on. Second step is completing the required DLM training, and many, perhaps most of you watching this video, whether you're doing it independently or in a facilitated session, many of you have already completed this, but it is very critical that this be done. You won't be able to proceed in the testing season until this is finished. There actually is a separate site. You can see the URL here. I'll give you a glimpse at what that looks like shortly. But the training lives on a separate site, on a Moodle site, which is just simply an online platform for an online class. It is differentiated depending on whether you are a returning teacher or a new teacher to alternate assessment, and it is in the format of watching videos and responding to certification questions. and it can be done completely independently. Now, there are some AAs across the state that may be bringing groups together to accomplish this required training. At least several AAs are allowing teachers to do that independently and then offering additional coaching in different ways. But this is a site where that required training needs to be done. So it essentially is a mini certification class that teachers have to take and complete before they start the alternate assessment process. Now, your alternate assessment coordinator or your AEA or UEN significant disabilities coordinator, and many of those folks are communicating with you on a regular basis, they can help you with initial access to this training. And it does confuse people a little bit because it does not live on the portal, it lives in a separate spot. But what happens is once training is completed, information will talk with the portal. So information flows back and forth. You're actually enrolled in the class, the Moodle course, once you are put in as a teacher in the system. And then once you complete that class, communication goes back to the portal so that it knows you're ready to go. And we have been told DLM is working on, for new teachers being put into the portal, our understanding is that they're hoping for a 1 to 2 day turnover. So once a data steward enters a teacher into the portal system, within just a couple of days, that teacher will be enrolled in the Moodle course so that they can get that required training done. And the goal is also for returning teachers that they be automatically enrolled if they're already in the system in the course, because they'll have to take a returning teacher training as well by August 1st. So when you take the training, there is a certificate that you can generate saying you've completed it, but the information should automatically flow into the portal as well. Now what you're seeing here is just a screenshot of what the Moodle, the training site, looks like, or at least the way it looked last year. At the time of this recording, it's under a little bit of a renovation, but it's essentially a place where once you would be enrolled in it, you'd be able to come here, click on the appropriate link, whether it be returning or existing teacher, and you'd be able to go in, watch the videos, and the quizzes would be attached, and that information would flow back. You see a link here that says facilitator resources. That is showing because, as I mentioned earlier, in some AAs or UENs, they're offering opportunities for teachers to come together to watch these videos together and take the required training. In others, they're allowing them to do this more independently and then offering different kinds of coaching opportunities. But this is what a screenshot that shows you what that training site will look like. The third step in getting prepared for testing is completing or updating your student access profiles. Now, for those of you that have completed the required DLM training, there would have been a lot of discussion about this, but this is the profile where you set student accommodation needs. A lot of these might be things listed in their IEP, but they can be chosen from the variety of options in the access profile. So this is called or referred to as a personal needs and preferences survey, and you can turn on various features, whether those could be things like read aloud, those could be things like magnification, color contrast, those kinds of things, text-to-speech features. So you have options for your students based on their individual needs and their disabilities. So again, your DLM training will have talked about this, but this is one step that you'll need to accomplish, is make sure that that the right things for your student are indicated in that access profile and that personal needs and preferences survey. How to get there, how to find it is fairly simple. When you're in the portal, there will be a section called Settings when you log in as a teacher, and then you can go to Students. You'll pick drop downs to indicate your district and your building and your school. And then when that happens, over on the right here where I'm indicating now, you would see a list of students, and you can check demographic information, and you can also scroll across, and as you scroll to the right, you'll see columns that will represent, one of the columns will represent this access profile, and there'll be a hyperlink that you can click on, and that will allow you to make the settings or to change the settings for your student or students. The fourth big item that you'll need to complete prior to testing is the first contact survey for each of your students. And you can see some of the information on the screen right now. This is a survey about the learner characteristics that goes well beyond demographic information. It's covering a variety of areas: communication, academic skills, student attention levels. All these questions need to be answered because the system is relying on that, particularly for the first testlets, to establish a recommended linkage level that's going to be appropriate for your students. And you can see there's 3 sections to the survey: expressive communication, reading skills, and math skills. So this is a really important item that needs to be completed, and the system will not allow you to start testing until this is documented as complete in the system. A little bit more on the first contact survey. The text that you see on screen now will just get you thinking about how the system is going to use this information. So it gives you an example. For instance, if you were to indicate that a student is using only one signed word at a time, does not read any words when presented in print, they would likely receive an initial precursor kind of a testlet. On the other hand, if there was a student that is using 2- and 3-word spoken word combinations and maybe even reading at or above the 3rd grade level, you're obviously going to get a very different kind of a testlet, possibly one at the target level, based on the essential elements. So you're going to want to make sure that there's very accurate information in the first contact survey. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, when you go to select your essential elements for testing in the fall, which will be talked about in the next video, the system is going to recommend the best linkage level based on the first contact survey. Now, you'll still have an opportunity. The educator can still override the system and choose a linkage level that you deem more appropriate. But then as we go through the system and as we even get into spring, when there's going to be more summative assessments, the more the system knows about how the student actually performs, the more it will rely on past test data for the student and less on that first contact data. And just a quick reference to where to find that first contact survey entry point: the same screen that I showed you for the personal needs and preferences. You're going to go to your Settings tab, Students, select the appropriate building and so forth. Then you would see a list of your students. And again, this is all presuming that your data steward has gotten your kids entered into the system. You would scroll across, look at demographics, and when you get to the right, you would see one column that is a first contact survey. There'll be a hyperlink for each student. You would click on that, and that's where you would actually access the survey and complete those questions. Now, this is a nice graphic that kind of shows you how this information is going to be used to inform the testing process, both fall and winter and spring. When you think about fall and winter testing windows, this is instructionally embedded testing, and we'll talk more about that in later videos, but this is where we're selecting specific essential elements, we're teaching them, we're providing targeted instruction, and then we're assessing in a very focused way using the DLM assessment system. So we're selecting essential elements, and there is a blueprint. Each state would have their own required blueprint of the areas that must be tested. Iowa has that as well. We'll share that in the next video training. It's a very important document. So the minimum that you must do would be the items on the blueprint, and those are for accountability purposes. Other essential elements may be tested as well, keeping in mind that all of our kids are to have access to the Iowa core. There's many essential elements that can be tested if it's helpful for you in instruction and assessment of the core. But at minimum, those on the blueprint are the ones that are for accountability purposes. So we know that the system is going to recommend a linkage level, and that's going to initially be based on the first contact survey. The educator can accept or override it. You can make some choices there. But then student performance is going to contribute to what's next. So as a student starts to take testlets in the future, the system will look not only at the first contact survey, but how they're performing on tests. And so that starts to inform information for the spring testing window. And a reminder, or this may be new information for some, unlike the fall and winter periods where it's instructionally embedded, the spring testing window is considered to be a summative time. So the system will actually select testlets for the student, and it will choose levels based on how that student has performed in the fall and winter. and you can see it's prescribed. The system will do it. It's just a little bit different in the spring. 5 testlets for math and 5 for ELA and 9 for science will be selected to cover kind of a subset of the blueprint. And that's going to be essentially retesting previously assessed content. Areas that have been instructed and tested in the fall will be assessed again through the selection in the spring. And again, there's this dynamic routing between subtests, and the more testlets that a student takes, the more the system will know about them and select the appropriate testlets for their instructional level. I think this graphic also kind of helps us visualize what's really happening. First off, all the system knows is what it knows that you put in as the first contact data from that survey, and it's going to recommend a linkage level for DLM for that student. But as we continue, as we give tests, it's going to be combining first contact data plus prior performance, and the more testlets we take, the system will rely more on prior performance, how the student is performing, and less on first contact data. Okay, so if this may be a good stopping point for some of you that are doing the facilitated version. If so, you can stop and watch the short video by DLM verifying student data, and that just illustrates how you can be sure that you've completed both the PNP survey and the first contact survey. It'll do kind of a video walkthrough that I've began to show you back here, where we go into settings, students, scroll across, and make sure that those things are completed. Important note, again, just can't emphasize this enough, if a first contact survey is not complete, the system will not let you proceed. It absolutely needs that information. Would note that some students will not require PNP settings, although most will. You'll recall that the PNP settings are those things that might be accommodations, text-to-speech, magnification, different things that help make the testing the most valid it can be for our students. So the vast majority of students will have needs, and many times those kinds of accommodations are going to appear in their IEP, and you'll need to translate those into the DLM PNP settings. So the system would allow you to not set anything in the personal needs and preferences, but I would emphasize that most students will have those needs, and those will be things that will help them have a good testing experience. Now, the DLM system uses this dynamic routing that we've talked about to assign a linkage level for each testlet that's going to be given to a student. And when that happens, a tip sheet is provided when you assign a testlet. So one tricky thing is that the materials that you're going to need to assess a student are not known before the test window opens. That we'll see later that once you assign essential elements during the fall and winter periods, it'll give you a tip sheet. And what that means is, for some testlets, you may need some additional materials. You may need some manipulatives to use for math. You may need some pictures or some other hands-on kinds of things. And the tip sheet tells you what those things are. But we don't know that until we've assigned that. To help teachers be more prepared, or to get a sense of some of the materials they might need, DLM has provided a listing of some commonly needed testing materials. So I can we can look at a few of these here. I've just linked to the mathematics collection materials, and this will, again, these items will be linked in the Agora materials. But what you're seeing here from the DLM site was actually the materials list for spring of 2016. These will be updated as necessary. But if we scroll through, you'll kind of get a sense. It's just showing you common materials that might be used for administering assessments at different grade levels. So we look here at grade 3, plastic containers, 2 identical objects, packages of identical objects like crayons, flashcards, gum, etc. As you scroll through, it just gives you a sense of the kinds of things you may need. So that would help. Depending on what grade you're going to be assessing, you can glance at these and get a sense of the kinds of things you might need for testing. So DLM provides that, knowing that we don't get the exact items until that tip page is shown when we assign assessments. Let's also take a quick look at the math glossary and vocabulary. I've jumped to the mathematics glossary on the DLM site, and this is just kind of a nice resource as you're providing instruction and as you're looking towards assessing math and the DLM assessment system, it's giving various terms that may be used. So these may not be terms that your kids are familiar with, and this gives you an opportunity to get familiar with those things so that you might use this with your kids. Angle, apply, area. So these are just words that will come up in different assessments depending on grade level and linkage levels. So you can see some of these things: box plot, cardinality, some of these things that your students may not be familiar with, but yet they will come up with test lists that are aligned with different levels of the core. So I wanted you to be aware that that is available. Some of the language, some of the vocabulary that is going to come up at different linkage levels for your kids. Let's look at some of the ELI collections here, and again, preparing for testing. So I've cut to the DLM site, the English Language Arts Materials Collection. Again, this idea that until we get that tip sheet, we won't know exactly some of the materials that we might need with our kids. This is the one from spring 2016. We'll get updates for the fall. But as you scroll through here, as I scroll through here, you can see some of the items that might be needed at different grade levels. Here I am in 3rd grade. Photographs of familiar people, rope, backpacks, markers, crayons, different things that might be used as manipulatives as you work through some of these test lists with your kids. We can look at various grades here. Here's 5th grade. A ball, a book, toy cars, just different kinds of items that may come up. And as you get into some of the assessments, it will suggest some of these items to use, but it will sometimes give you the freedom to use other items. But again, this document just gives you a sense of some of the things that you might need so that you can do a little bit of preparation prior to actual testing. Very important here, I'm gonna take a link to the familiar text for writing. This link will go directly to some of the books that are actually going to be used in the DLM assessment. Now, at the initial precursor level and sometimes at the distal and proximal precursor levels, there is this concept of students having familiar texts. So these are available. They're not secret. You can use these in your instruction at different grade levels. So let's take a look at what these are. So here we are in the familiar text section of the DLM site, and again, this will be directly linked on the Agora site so that you can get to this pretty easily. And as I scan through here again, at certain linkage levels and in certain grades, you will actually see variations of these familiar texts. They come from Tar Heel Reader, and this is Tar Heel Reader we'll talk about a little bit later as well, on how you can use some of that in your instruction. It's an open source kind of a website for text specifically designed for individuals with disabilities, and so these come from Tar Heel Reader, but they are the ones that were actually used in some of the DLM testlets. So for example, Henry and Mudge, Ramona Quimby, you will see variations of these appearing in some of the 3rd grade testlets. So if I just, and you can see it goes up at the various grade levels, but let's take a look here. So you can see these are broken down into different stories kind of associated with this Ramona Quimby theme. So I could just pick one, and you can see these are specific kind of modified text that can be used. There is a text-to-speech setting on here that you can use. So again, these are designed to be used in your instruction in preparation for testing and just to help with your instruction. I'm not turning on the text-to-speech here, but you can see the kinds of things that are available. Notice how these kind of the subset of stories under the Ramona Quimby, some are stories, some are pulled out themes that would be informational kinds of text, depending on the essential element that you're assessing. It may be looking at informational kinds of text, so you can see some of the examples here: babysitting, book reports, buses, things that may come from the Ramona story. So we could just open one, and you can see an adapted story on babysitting. Again, there would be text-to-speech available, that I'm not turning on right now for our purposes. And finally, let's take a quick look at the science materials collection. As with ELA and math, it's the same for science. You're seeing the 2016 spring window. Again, we'll see new variations of this as we move into the fall for the coming school year. But same idea. Since we don't get our tip pages until we assign things, you can look at the different levels, and it's a little bit broader here for science. You can see elementary, middle school, high school level, but you can see some of the things that you may need to administer the testlets. You'll also notice, for those of you that haven't done science before, sometimes when you get your tip sheet after you've verified that you're going to give a testlet, it will also include a PDF that may have some pictures or visuals that you will use. But this gives you just some basic information on some of the things that might actually be used in the science assessments. And again, we've highlighted a few, but just a reminder that the DLM, the Iowa site specifically under DLM, just does have a large array of resources to help you with the ELA math and science assessments. This URL up here is the one that goes to that page that we demoed at the beginning of this video module, where the various manuals and those kinds of things live. And there are separate resources pages that go along with ELA math and science as well. All of these links we're going to have on the Agora for you to access, so we won't look at them right now, but just a reminder that there is really a wealth of information on the DLM site that you will want to check out. Now, as you prepare for the testing season, I want you to be aware that there are practice activities available for teachers to use with their students. And I've just shown a screenshot from the Test Administrator's Manual, and there are detailed instructions in the manual on how you could access these things. But essentially, DLM has prepared demo logins, so you can see here these are pretend students that you would log into the KITE system, and when you do that, you would get an example of what testing might look like with different settings in PNP. So you can see the examples here. In some cases, there may be color contrast. In some cases, there may be magnification. So that gives you a chance, if you would like to log in and use some practice activities. And the purpose is not practice in terms of content. This is really to familiarize, to get students familiar with the way testlets look. So for some of your students, it may be of benefit. It may be a benefit for you just to give you a feel if you're new to this process. But for practice activities, you would use these demo logins. Again, I've given you a few here. In the Test Administrator's Manual, there are more that would show you what tests look like for with different settings. So you're welcome to do that. Keep in mind that when you log into KITE, it appears as if you can have practice activities when the student is going in as themselves, but practice activities actually are not available if you're logged in with a live student. So if you have an interest in looking at some of these, either on your own or with your student, you're going to want to use these demo logins that are available and plan for that. Just final thing that I'll mention on this particular video module, strongly suggest that each of you subscribe to test updates. Now, the screenshot I'm showing you right now is that DLM page, dynamiclearningmaps.org/Iowa, and this probably looks familiar. I took you to this in the beginning of the video, where you can find your manuals and resources. And when you go there, you can see over to the right here, I've drawn an arrow. There is a link where you can subscribe to test updates. You just click on that link, add in your email, and that will get you updates. So if you do that, DLM will periodically send you updates, things that are happening in the testing process, even if there's problems or glitches or things like that, or if the system may be down. The test update is a good place to get you information like that. So I would just really encourage each of you to subscribe to that, and that will help keep you in the loop with new information as it comes out. Okay, I want to thank viewers for watching this video training. We're going to end here, and look forward to talking with you on the next module.